Good. Here we go.
All right, we are broadcasting, and our attendees are joining us right now. Very exciting.
Yeah. Wow, the number just keeps going up and up and up.
Yes, we had a really great response for this call today, which is awesome that there are so many amazing businesses in our area that are really interested in learning what to do to make sure that to take advantage of this time and are able to thrive. It's actually been my message since this all started is don't freak out, there's opportunity, you know, there's right action to take. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited that you're on with us today. So I'll give it like another minute here for everyone else to pop in, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Perfect. Anything fun happen in your neck of the woods this morning?
We got a frost this morning. That's not fun.
Oh, wow.
But yeah. And it's May, and we got a frost. I was not happy, and I'm concerned about the plant, but that's all right.
Yeah, May's not the time for that, that's for sure.
Yeah, we're doing, you know, one of the great things about this time is the focus on self-sufficiency. So we're doing a vegetable garden for the first time.
Awesome. Very good. All right, ready to jump in?
Yeah, all right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Leia Shilobod, the IT Princess of Power and CEO here at InTech Solutions. First, I want to congratulate everyone who is joining this call because you're taking the time to you really care about your company and learn the 4 steps to move your business from defense to offense during times of disruption. I also want to thank the Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce for promoting and sponsoring this event. Their commitment to businesses is amazing, and getting the word out so that everyone knows about this event. Today we have Ryan Markel with us from Petra Coach. Ryan and I have known each other for about 6 years, and he's been my business coach for the last 2 years. I'm very excited that he agreed to come and do this. Like I had mentioned, I have been committed to bringing together the best resources for businesses in our area so that they can not just survive but thrive. And the information that he's going to present today will absolutely be stellar. Before we jump into the content, though, just some quick housekeeping. Although the chat is available, what we're going to be doing for question and answer is actually using the Q&A area of Zoom down at the bottom. The only problem with the chat is that sometimes the questions get lost, and I want to make sure that we take the time to be able to answer any questions that you guys have. So whatever questions you have, please post in Q&A, and we'll make sure that we answer those at the end of the presentation. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce to you all Ryan Markel.
Thanks, Leia. I appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me to join you and your group today, and for getting such a great turnout of people attending this. So a couple, as Leia said, housekeeping items, a couple additional housekeeping items from my perspective. I can all but guarantee that there will be some type of a technical difficulty here. So I know many of us have been on webinars and Zoom chats more than ever before over the last 6 weeks. And so we've seen that. I was actually telling Leia as we were connecting just before the start of this, I was conducting a quarterly planning session for 19 people on Zoom this morning. About halfway through, I clicked the mute button and my Zoom crashed. So I doubt, that's never happened before, so I doubt that'll happen here. But Leia or others, please just shoot a note if the slides don't show. If you can't hear me for some reason, I'm happy to go back and repeat. Leia, I also believe, are we going to record this for the audience as well?
Yes, absolutely. And we're recording it right now. It will be available later today if you need to go back through and review it. And also, I know that there are some people who told me that they wanted this content, but they could not attend. So I did promise them a recording.
Okay, great. And I also committed to Leia to providing a copy of the slide deck. And we've got a bunch of resources that we'll provide links and instructions to as well in that recap that'll go out. So let's jump in here. And here's our first test at any potential technical difficulties. So let me see if I can get my screen shared correctly. All right, and Leia, I gotta appreciate you. You always laugh at my pathetic attempts at humor called jokes, so thank you for that. Can you see you can see my screen okay, Leia?
Yes, it's perfect.
All right, so here we go. So we are talking today about the 4 steps to move your business from defense to offense during times of disruption. I'll get to a bit more about who I am in a minute. I just want to jump in and get started. As we talk about those technical challenges that will come up, I do want to share with you that for those of our academic friends, that Isaac Newton actually discovered calculus while in quarantine. Shakespeare wrote King Lear, and all of us, if we haven't yet, will learn how to unmute our microphones during a Zoom meeting while in quarantine. I actually referenced that 3 times today in that quarterly planning session I was sharing with you guys earlier. The other part is some people actually learn how to shut off and turn on their camera as well. A few ground rules: make sure you do stay present. Phones and email on do not disturb. There is a lot of content here. I know that nobody on this call was sitting around this morning going, gosh, I really wish at around 12:30 this afternoon there was something I could do for an hour to occupy my time. So I do not take lightly the amount of time that you are devoting to this topic. So thank you for that. And I encourage you, actually I implore you, to ensure that you commit to this and pay attention. And see, there's my first technical difficulty as I hit the mouse wheel and it starts to jump around. So here we go again. Today is interactive, so ask questions, as Leia mentioned, in the Q&A box at the bottom. Make sure you're putting those questions in. I get really bored if I sit here and just talk to a screen all day. So please put those questions in the chat as they come up. And Leia, feel free to interrupt me as we're going. You want to answer those questions as they're relevant during the presentation. And then your task, in addition to staying present, is you need to look for ways to improve and to take action. So a couple quotes that come to mind for me is that ideas are cheap. Ideas don't cost much. Anybody can come up with ideas. It's action that is valuable. And then secondly, we've got to stay focused on what we're going to do to improve. So don't wish that the current circumstances were easier. Wish that we were better. So how can we improve to be better for the current times that we're facing here? So right now, speaking of those current times, is it really? I didn't know that.
I had to say that. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah. For those of you that don't know, I am a student of Stoic philosophy. So when you said that, I was like, yeah. All right.
That is perfect. I'll keep jumping in. Thank you. Yeah, Andy loves that quote, so you have to mention that to him next time you see each other. So right now there is more unknown than ever before, and I would even say that right now there's more unknown than even 3 or 4 weeks ago. When we were talking about, do we shut down the country? Do we shut down schools? What do we do? What are we doing with masks or gloves? There was some unknown. Now there's literally more unknown because I don't know when my business is going to come back in terms of when the office will reopen. We have some plans and some ideas around that, what that looks like. And there's multiple other industries that have more unknown and don't know those things. So the current landscape we're at is that there's so much that's unknown. As a result, having a plan is the #1 most important thing, because at least when we have a plan, we have something that is known, even if it's not accurate. The reason to have a plan is to have something to change from as information changes. So today we're going to go over how you go through these 4 steps to have a plan for the current time of disruption. As I mentioned, my name is Ryan Markel. I am a certified Petra Coach. That is an organization based in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville, which is where I actually live. We are the largest group in the world of certified scaling up coaches. For those that are familiar with Verne Harnish or the Rockefeller habits or the scaling up methodology, I have coached over 100 companies in my career, and I am an entrepreneur. I actually have an equity stake in an IT consulting firm just similar to Leia's, except it's on the West Coast in Southern California. You'll hear me mention a lot of examples of companies that I've worked with and what we've done internally at Petra as it applies to the content that we're going through here. So the 4 key steps we're going to go over is that we need to know our playing field. We need to pick our targets or define how we score, what the goal is. We then need to write the play, come up with the play or the plan of the play we're going to run of how we intend to score or hit that target. And then we're going to run the play and keep score. So first thing we have to do is determine what's our playing field. Like if I said we're going to go play a game of football, are we playing on a field? Are we playing in a driveway? Are we playing on a street? Are we playing in a park? We have to identify the lay of the landscape, which is where we're going to spend the most of our meat today. Then we have to pick what our goals are. I'm going to tell you what that looks like. We don't have quite enough time to go through how to pick them most effectively, but I'll give you links to resources to help you do that in the future. Then I'll give you a quick overview of a tool to write out a plan for what are these priorities. It's a phenomenal tool that will take this fuzziness to action very quickly. And then I'll give you a couple ways to, from a software standpoint and from a communication rhythm perspective, of how to execute and keep score along the way. So as I mentioned, we're going to give you a bunch of tools you'll see. Stick around till the end. I'll give you a link that you click on, and you'll get access to over a dozen tools, including a free copy of our CEO and Founders book as well. So as we get to knowing your playing field, let's jump right in. So the first step here is we have to know, what does our playing field even look like? What is the current landscape? I work with businesses of all sizes and industries throughout North America. Some, as a result of COVID-19, have literally gone to an 8-figure annual run rate to $0 in revenue overnight. Others have more business now than they've ever had before. And there's a very, very few subset of those that aren't impacted much. As you can imagine, the plans that we need to put in place are different for each category of those businesses based off of what their current playing field looks like. So the way that we're going to do this is a tool we call SWOT. Many of you have probably heard of this: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The difference here that I want to emphasize is this is a short-term SWOT. So we've changed the labels a little bit. We've changed the instructions to focus us on what are those things in the short term, I'd say over the next 30 to 90 days, that are relevant. Traditionally, a SWOT analysis plays out over 1 to 2 years. So what are those things that are my strengths over the next year or two? What are those opportunities over the next year or two, and so on? In this instance, we want to be thinking much shorter for 2 reasons. One is it's always easier to plan for a shorter time period. So if I were to say, hey, what does the next 10 years of your life look like? That's a pretty overwhelming task to think through in many cases. If I were to say, hey, what are you doing over the next 10 days? Now, granted, right now, that could be difficult to think through. But in general, it's a lot easier to plan for a 10-day period than a 10-year period. So shrink this down to a 30 to 90-day timeline of what you're planning for, and you'll be more effective. So let's jump into what those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats look like. And then while we don't have time to go deep in detail, I will give you an example in the threat section of a specific company that I work with. So in terms of what are your strengths, we want to be looking at what are the capabilities you have, what are those attributes. You know, Leia, something I've heard that really applies here is think about what are those assets in your business. Like if you were to sit here and go over the next 30 to 90 days, what are the specific things, those assets, either literal financial assets, right? Or those things that are assets in terms of a talent that your team has or a specific advantage that you have in the marketplace, and focus on what are those assets that you have in the business, and those are your strengths. The other thing I want to focus on here is to be very, very clear. So I've had people share with me when I go through this with them, they'll say, oh, communication is a strength. Well, I also hear most people put communication as a weakness. So it's important to say what specific type of communication, what facet of communication is in fact the strength, and what facet of communication may be the weakness. So speaking of weaknesses, I want you to think about what weaknesses do you have in your business over the next 30 to 90 days. As I look at these, the question I often ask myself as it pertains to weaknesses is, what are those things that I'm embarrassed about in my business? So we want to go a much deeper level and not just think surface level. It's important, as it states in the instructions on this resource, to not limit yourself to the things that are internal that you can for sure eliminate. We may just simply not be able to eliminate these things over the next 30 to 90 days. We may only be able to mitigate or lessen the extent of those weaknesses. Leia, did you have something you wanted to add or chime in there?
I think that the thing within your control is really key, because it definitely has to be something that you can, if you put something there that is completely out of your control, there's nothing you can do about it, then it's not helpful, because you're just looking at something helplessly. And the idea of identifying weaknesses is to be able to take action in some way, like what you said, to be able to lessen or mediate or eliminate. And if it's outside of your control, you can't do either of those.
That's well said, yeah. So with weaknesses, you want to be thinking about internal, what's in your control, as Leia mentioned, not those factors that are in the marketplace. So a weakness would not be, gosh, I'm in the restaurant or in the food service or hospitality industry. Now, you could potentially control that if you were to make a significant pivot, but that wouldn't necessarily fall under a weakness. A weakness could be, we have a single source of revenue right now, and we need to identify more diversification in what we can take to market. So as we go through this, I'll give you some additional examples, but be thinking about those specific weaknesses. The more embarrassing and the deeper level, the better, so that you can frame up, what does your battlefield look like? What does the field of play look like, right? That's why we're doing this, is to get a lay of the land of where we're at today. As we shift now to those things that are external to the business, that are outside of your control. You can control your actions towards them, but ultimately are outside of your control. I want to think about opportunities. So this is where you get to play offense more, and thinking about, what are those opportunities that exist in the market. Leia framed up that right now, when we go into a time of crisis, there's always opportunity to grow. Disruption is where more growth and opportunity exists, even though it doesn't feel that way, than ever before. So be thinking about, what are those opportunities that we could go pursue? And remember that timeline, 30 to 90 days, right? So short term. So it's not going to be, wow, we could go do this incredible thing that's going to take us 6 to 18 months to build, let alone launch. It's, what are those opportunities in the current marketplace over the next 30 to 90 days? Be focused on that growth piece, right? And there's a lot of ways to grow. You can grow top line in terms of getting additional market share. You can grow bottom line in terms of opportunities to gain efficiency. You can also, there's going to be opportunities potentially in the marketplace for talent as well. So be thinking about growth, and then what's going to generate cash. And even though I shared 30 to 90 days, I want you to really challenge yourself to not limit yourself by what you've done in the past. So another quote that I don't think is a Stoic quote, but we'll see, you can confirm for me here, is, you can't drag your past into the future. So when you're thinking about opportunities, if you're looking backwards as, well, what I did over the last year is this, so what might my opportunities be? You're going to limit what you can actually see as those opportunities going into the future. And then lastly, thinking about those threats. So these are those external threats that are beyond your control, that we cannot eliminate. We want to mitigate the impact of them, and be thinking about, what are those things, not what can you do to mitigate, focused on, what are the threats on my current field of play? What are the threats in my environment that I need to be aware of? So we're gonna keep digging into this field of play concept before we go figure out what the target is. It's extremely crucial that we have a clear picture of what we're dealing with, what the rules of the game are, what our field of play is, before we go and establish what is it that's most important for us to go do. I'm going to jump into a specific example here in threats with a company that I coach. I apologize in advance for the cheesy title I came up with from a confidentiality standpoint. I didn't want to put the actual company's name, but you'll see it's Tasty Tots Catering, which in my research, because I'm not very creative, I couldn't come up with anything else. Apparently that is a literal company somewhere in the United States, so that is not the company I'm talking about. Yeah, who knew, right? But with that being said, this organization serves over 250 daycares and schools. This is all prior to COVID-19. They had 150 employees. They deliver hot food in those hotel catering pans, right? And their revenue, literally overnight, as daycares and schools were ordered to close, like we can all relate to that, especially those of us that have young kids. Their revenue went from a $17 million annual run rate. And by the way, they were growing at about 15 to 20% year over year over the last 3 years to $0. So they went from 17 million to nothing overnight. As a result, they furloughed 75% of their staff. Just to paint the picture, they have 2 months at the time of operating capital in the bank. And just an important note here, they've been talking about offering food to the families of the children that they serve through the daycare and school systems for roughly the last 5 years. So their current model is, hey, we make these big hotel pans full of food, we deliver them to the daycare or the school, and then through whatever resource that may be, through some type of a lunch line, that food gets served to the kids within the care. What they've said is, when these kids go home, how can we provide them with healthy food at home as well? So you'll see how that becomes relevant here in a bit. So as we look at specific threats for a literal organization, I wanted to share with you, as we were talking through this with them, they said, oh, COVID-19 is a threat. And I said, well, yeah, the impact of COVID-19 is a threat for everybody right now. That is literally the definition of something we can't control. I hope we could. And saying COVID-19 is a threat gave them nothing to plan for. So we had to break it down much further to specific, actionable threats for this organization. Leia, did you have something you wanted to jump in with there?
No, that's exactly what I was saying. Like COVID-19, it means nothing.
Right.
It's like when people call me and they say, nothing's working, can you fix it? I can't fix nothing's working.
Right, right. Yep, exactly. Or, hey, the internet's down. The internet, nothing's going on. Like, well, I need more specifics of what you did, what's going on, what can I resolve, right? So as we look at these threats, and there were more that we came up with, the 3 biggest ones we identified, and 2 of them were completely unexpected and changed the entire trajectory of their plan of how to mitigate these threats. So the first one was pretty obvious, right? So if their production staff has a verified case of COVID-19 or even comes in contact with somebody outside of work with COVID-19, it's going to have a negative impact. If it happens at the facility, they'd have to shut down the plant for 2 days, which would be very disruptive. And if it's somebody outside, then they could not be allowed back to work for a bit. The 2 they didn't think about until we went through this exercise was, as a result of their reduced headcount, they have many instances of the worst number in business, which is 1. When you have 1 person that can do something, that's a huge threat to your organization, right? So their finance team shifted from 4 people to just their CFO. So now their CFO is the only person who's authorized to run payroll. That's a big threat, right? Because if that CFO gets sick and really gets sick and can't come to work, now we can't pay the 25% of the headcount that's left. Similarly, they started to identify, well, we understand what would be the threat if we get COVID-19 and have to shut down for 2 days. But what happens if one of our suppliers has that situation happen, right? And what's even more of an issue if our suppliers aren't preventing it like we are? Because this organization has been doing this for a while now, where they've got phenomenal safety procedures in place. They spray every 30 days. To make sure that to kill any viruses in the facility with just a phenomenal chemical compound that you can, is not harmful to humans at all. But they identified what happens if vendors, one of their supply chain providers, were to have an outbreak. And so as a result, they started building out, well, what do we got to go do? What are these key big constraints where there's only one supplier we currently have providing this type of food, be it chicken or vegetables or what have you, and where do we get those backups in place? So I wanted to give you a specific example here. Mind you, this is about a 15 or 20-minute exercise just on threats to get to this level of specificity, so you can see what you need to be doing in each of these 4 boxes on the short-term SWOT analysis sheet. I will come back to this Tasty Tots catering company for examples throughout this presentation. So now we're going to jump into a way to think about what we need to be doing in our business given the actions we could take based off of the current playing field around the short-term SWOT analysis. So we've come up with this internally around defense, stabilize, reset, and offense. And we identified this methodology ourselves first, because when this hit, we went, what do we need to do? And we went, okay, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to play defense. What do we have to do to shore up cash and do things of that nature to play defense? All right, now what do we need to do to go stabilize our organization? Now, how do we think about resetting our organization in this new, quote unquote, new normal? And then how do we potentially go out and play offense right now, given the opportunities that are in front of us? So I'm going to run through this with you. Be thinking about how these apply to your organization as I go through this. And then we'll also give you some tools of how to do these as well. So the first place, we're going to sit there and go, yeah, tough times. Hey, you know, it's tough, right? We got to deal with this. Let's move forward. We're going to do defense, stabilize, reset, offense. So in terms of defense, first place to look is scenario planning. So we created a 20-point checklist we call the adaptive crisis checklist, which we will provide to you. And it's 20 different scenarios to score yourself 0 through 10. 0, this doesn't impact me at all. 10, oh my gosh, if this were to happen, this could crush, or this could literally put us out of business, right? And going through and identifying those 20 different places that you may be exposed from a defense perspective. Be thinking in terms of defense around the health, safety, and well-being of your team. Many of us now are to the point where we're working from home, but I like the last 2 here. Think of accounts receivable and accounts payable. These are areas that we often have taken for granted, and right now cash flow is more critical than ever before. So doing something to stay focused, and I'll give you some tips throughout this presentation on what to do there around how to improve accounts receivable in your organization. As we talk about cash, make sure that we are obsessed over cash. This is a great opportunity to look through and say, okay, look at my credit card statement, look at those things that hit every single month. What are those charges that I may not need right now, right? So I do think it's important to reduce spend where you can and not hunker down and just sit there and not be thinking about how can we grow or play offense. So make sure that you are reducing cash so you can invest where it's needed. And then once again, focusing on what are those AR practices that we need to go out and be doing. Where to start from a cash perspective is the CEO should get a daily report on cash. Historically, I've recommended those weekly. For right now, I think it's critical to have it be daily so it's top of mind. We should also get a weekly report on cash compared to AR, accounts receivable or accounts payable, work in progress or backlog. And we want to have that be absolutely forefront, top of mind for where we're at. And then focusing on those cash levers, which I'll get to now here as we go through more. So I'm not expecting you to take notes. As I said, this will be provided in the recap and you'll see slides. But we've created a number of different things here that we can do to improve the speed, being faster around collecting our cash and AR. Also, what can we do to maybe slow down our accounts payable by a day or two? The one I want to emphasize is if you're looking at the accounts receivable ones, you see on there the third one down, it's send a handwritten note of appreciation every time a payment is received. And I love the idea, even include like a $1 scratch or lottery ticket saying thank you. Especially for those of you that have larger clients that are paying a good amount of money, sending those notes saying, hey, I know times are tough right now, thank you for paying your bill on time, really creates that energy around getting people to bring cash into your organization. Leia, any questions we need to be addressing that are coming through on the chat so far?
The only one was just to clarify if the slides would be available. And yes, and you had mentioned that the slides will definitely be available afterwards, because I know, like you mentioned, you're going through a massive amount of information in a very short period of time.
Yep.
What you had just said about like the appreciation of existing clients, that's huge. It's always something that has been really important and a driver here at InTech, but especially now. Like, we don't just work with people because we want a check. We actually really care about the businesses we work with, and this is especially the time that I have to remind them that, you know, we're here. We're here to help you. We care about you and doing well. And thank you so much for staying in there. And that's one of the reasons why I invited every single client to this today.
That's great. I love your approach is that, yes, you provide phenomenal support from an IT standpoint, and you care about the actual business. That's so rare. Mm-hmm. And I know we've talked about the different things you're providing resources to from a lending perspective, this webinar and others. It's just great to see the diversity and the diversification that you're providing in your services to your network. As we continue through this, so we're going to jump into stabilize. So how do you stabilize? Now you've sat there and played defense. What do we need to go prevent? How do you stabilize your organization? So a big focus is on communication, especially as we're remote. So daily huddles are key. We do that internally with at Petra. I know, Leia, you and the team at InTech do that. That's a cornerstone of the Rockefeller habits. That 10 to 15 minute daily meeting, I'll get to more details on that later in the presentation. But that communication is key, especially if your team's working from home. Doing that through Zoom, where people can see each other with the camera, is critical. Additionally, the third option down is one-on-one check-ins with the team, and not just around business. Something I've seen come about is doing these 15-minute dream walks or talks, right? So how can you take 15 minutes once a month with one member on your team to talk nothing about business, nothing about day-to-day, and just go, hey, so what are your dreams? Like, where do you want to be in the next 10 or 15 years? And get people out of the current headspace of this crisis and talking through with them, like, what does the future look like? Building that bond and relationship with your team right now, is more able. You're able to, right? Because people are more receptive to that communication. And B, it's more critical than ever before. I cannot emphasize it enough. People are underestimating how much communication we need in terms of checking in on one another. So make sure you're focused on that to stabilize your business. And then second from the bottom, we've got build a forecast and a plan for each point, 20%, 40%, 50%, whatever those thresholds are. If you were to reduce your revenue by those amounts, what would the actions within the business be that you need to take? And then inform the team. Right now, we're all, as I started this out, there's more unknown than ever before. So we can say at 20% business reduction is where we'll start making salary cuts, and we'll do that across the board, or 20% is where we're going to lay off temporary labor. I mean, sharing that with the team is crucial so that they understand what's going on. I will assure you, the unknown is always worse than the known. So as much as you're going to sit there and say, I don't know if I want to do that, it's going to scare people, people are coming up with worse scenarios than what reality is. So sharing what those forecasts are and those plans for each point is key. As you do those dream walks, you'll see that's the last one here. There's this concept from John DeJulius, who's the head of an organization called The Relationship, wrote the book, The Relationship Economy. Just a phenomenal thought leader. He created this concept called F.O.R.D, family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. And a great exercise with you to do in your leadership team is to sit at a table and just randomly pick one employee at your organization and see how many people around the table can tell you about their family, about their occupation, like what do they actually do in the company? What do they like to do for fun outside of work? What are their passions for recreation? And then back to that dreams piece. What is it that are the dreams that they have, right? this is a great exercise to spend for just 10 or 15 minutes with each team member so that you can answer those questions. Each time we do this with an organization and ask, hey, pick somebody out. What is your family occupation? What is their family? What do they do? What do they like to do for fun? What are their dreams? Very few, if any, people around the room know the answers to those questions. And then lastly, and this is an example of what we've done at Petra, what can you provide, if you look at the bottom, to your customers and others that would be helpful right now? So we've created this entire COVID-19 resource center. We're doing webinars with thought leaders, and we'll give you a link to what this is, and you can go through and see what free webinars we've recorded and are doing in the future. But you'll see, like, we've created all these content and resources, much like Leia's been doing. I mean, she's the example of this in saying, what else can we provide? Well, we can provide webinars to our teams. We can provide information on the loans and relief and what have you. So be thinking about how you can provide additional information and become even more valuable right now as a result of this pandemic. From a financial standpoint, I think it's important to identify where you're at today and then forecast and model out what it looks like as, I think, 3 inflection points would be good. So maybe it's that 10, 25, and 50% reduction, but making sure that you have a clear idea of what does it look like when business drops to this point, and what's the implication going to be. And then once again, at the bottom of this, the absence of information is worse than the worst case scenario. So make sure we're sharing with our teams what it is that will happen at those points in time. It's important that you have those travel and work authorization letters if you're an essential business. It's also important now to start thinking about what are our return to office plans, or for those, Leia, like your business that goes on site at other locations, like what does that look like? What are our plans going to be once we can go on site to support our clients, and how do we handle that? What permissions do we need? I know at Petra, one of the things we're doing is once we start doing planning days in person with organizations, we will send an email to every single attendee individually, getting their approval to have 2 strangers show up in this group, because we don't know if they have a parent or a child or themselves at home that might be immunocompromised and don't feel comfortable having somebody else show up at that location. All right, let's jump into reset as we're moving along here. So I love this picture. Do you want to start over? So what I'll say is that every business that I've been involved in and work with has had a list of things that they go, gosh, if I started from scratch, I would do this differently. Or if I had a year to just work on stuff, I would do this differently. This list, this closet, if you will, of ideas that they just haven't been able to work through. So as we go through this, I want you to think about that you've needed to change already, right? There is a need to make changes even before COVID-19. This current pain and disruption has created the opportunity. And so I really want you to be thinking about, who do we need to become? Like, what do we need to do as a result of this? Specifically, what's the same? What needs to be different? And what's completely, totally new and potentially even like outrageous that we do need to go do as an organization? Pick a target, right? So pick a target date, which you'll see I'm going to speak to later. Listen to your clients, which we're going to jump into a slide here in a minute of what that looks like, and be thinking about what solutions are in demand. So I used that example earlier of Tasty Tots Catering. They had wanted for 5 years to create those products. Well, in 2 weeks, not only did they come up with the idea and build a plan, they literally had frozen meals delivered to people's homes. And through that innovation, through that reset, they've been able to significantly increase their runway. For now, they have essentially over a year of operating capital, because their burn rate has dropped tremendously, because their revenue is now up over that $0 that it went to, right? So it's important to look at, now is the opportunity, maybe of a lifetime. They may never have done that. I can sure guarantee you they never would have done it in 2 weeks like they did. And remember, this is what entrepreneurs love to do. Like every entrepreneur that's on here, we started our business saying we've got to go do this, right? This is what we love to do. Now's our time to reset. Those conversations with clients are 4 questions. One is Start with them. How are you doing right now? And it's important that you don't go, hey, how are you doing? No, it's how are you doing? So that they understand you're here for them. Then we want to understand what's going on in their industry. Then we start to move to us. How are we doing right now? Are you getting what you need from us? And then lastly, how can we be most helpful right now? The answers to these conversations should be shared with the executive team on a daily rhythm, right? Oh, I talked to Frank from ABC Construction, and he said what they'd really love to see from us is this. We need to increase the speed of those communication rhythms, and this will give you what we need to be doing from a reset standpoint. The last thing on this is the one we typically forget to do, which is closing the loop. So let's make sure we're going back to that client that gave feedback, even if it's to tell them we don't have the capacity right now to follow through on that request, and it's on our list, and we'll check in on it again in 3 months. Now, as we look through to offense, this is where we start to go, what can we really go do to push the envelope further, in addition to simply simply resetting? Think about and define, what does the new business look like, and what will you be offering? Two things on here in the middle that I think most people are neglecting is, right now marketing is cheap. I'm going to give you an example of really bad cheap marketing, but you know, the ability to connect with people that are not traveling, that are not on planes. You have people that are giving you their attention more so than ever before. So marketing is truly cheaper than it's been, and that's an area where you should definitely be investing. And then hiring is far easier. So we've spent the last 5 years in a very low unemployment rate. In some markets, you could argue it's a negative unemployment rate, building our teams. And several A players out there, through no fault of their own in various industries, are looking for work. So as you're looking to build out what the offensive strategy looks like, keep in mind that there are people out there that you've never had access to before. And then lastly, train your current team to get them ready for what that new offensive strategy is. Some ideas to build that offensive piece is create a top 25 dream client list. You know, going through, and they're home like the rest of us, so just schedule a 15-minute Zoom meeting, even sending them a picture of you with your dog or kids at home, because that's where they're at. So you can, you know, get comfortable with them even before that conversation. Using LinkedIn to connect to people right now is crucial, because we can't go just drop into their office. And that gets you out of just their inbox, and you can reach out through LinkedIn. And then making sure that we're focusing on connecting and adding value, not just coming across in a salesy way. In the spirit of marketing and not coming off as salesy, we got this ad that says, now is the smartest time to invest in a yacht, which I think is the absolute wrong message to have. There's all sorts of ways you could talk about, if you're a yacht company, what you do. I don't think there's a lot of people going, you know what? Gosh, right now I would love to invest in a yacht. So the Moorings group posted this a month ago on social media. I thought it was a great example of what not to do. As far as talent, you will be able to find that talent. So make sure that you're focused on who are those A and B players in your team you need to keep, and then be building out that bench, or literally go out and hire people for that you need to fill out your roster. Be thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, those projects that you've dreamed of, that you've always wanted to do and never had the time to do it, and be thinking about how you can be ready as the economy begins to rebound for this upturn. All right, so change is inevitable. That's what we're all going through. It's the growth that is optional. So that was a whole big bunch around establishing what is our field of play. You identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Then you go into, what are these ways I could play defense, stabilize, reset, and offense? Now I have an understanding of my field of play. Now we move into picking our target. The reason I spent so much time on knowing our field of play is that's where most people spend almost no time. And if we don't get a really clear picture of where we're at, we're gonna pick the wrong target unless we just get lucky. So as you pick your target, we want to know, where are you headed? And we don't want to go in 8 different directions as the signs are here. We want to go in 1 or 2, right? So less is a lot more. Pick 1 or 2 or maybe 3 things that you need to go hit this quarter. And the way you do that is you start with this tool. It's a 30, 60, 90-day priority worksheet. We put 30 or 60, 90 days because we don't know your industry. You need to decide, am I planning for 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days, right? So the first thing you need to do is pick a date. There's space in here to identify what are the top 5 things I could do. I think you're better off picking the top 2 to 3. So the first thing to do is pick the top 2 to 3. This is a great tool to do that. Then you assign the owners. So who's going to make sure that we get these things done over the next 30 or 60, 90 days that are the most important pieces we need to accomplish. So we identified what's the field of play. Now we've identified how we score or what's the target we're going after, right? The next step we need to look at is how do we write the plays to go accomplish that goal? I will tell you, before I get into this, these last 2 parts, people tend to sit there and go, yeah, I know I need to do that, but yeah, I don't have the time to. And I will tell you that this is what we'll regret not doing, is not having a clear plan of action of where we want to go based off of where we are right now. As far as writing the plays of how we get there, we need to determine what play we are running. I do this when I share this concept in front of rooms. I always ask the team, Leia, I say, okay, you guys all lead people here, right? Raise your hand. They say yes. It's okay. How many of you feel extremely confident that everybody you lead is in the right place at that moment in the day, doing the right thing and working together, right? And I get the same reaction, Scott, from you, where people kind of hold back a smirk, maybe look a little left or right, going like, maybe I'm worse than other people. Like, what does this look like? It's absolutely critical that we identify the positions in the play and what people are doing so that we can all work together to accomplish that goal. So we created this tool called a company priority worksheet, which I don't have time today to go through how to use, though it is in the resources that we will provide you with copies of or provide you with access to. Through this, you will pick your team, you'll define what success looks like, you'll define what the worst case scenario is. And I will tell you, I'm not a pessimistic person, I'm very optimistic. The worst case scenario is my favorite box on this entire tool because it helps to justify why we're doing this. If there's not much of a worst case scenario if we don't get this done, there's not a real compelling reason to go and do that work. So this is a great checks and balance and motivator to point us in the right direction as to why we're doing this work over this next 30 to 90 days. And then at the bottom, you'll identify what is your ideal outcome. On the back of that tool will be a list that you can go through and you can assign the different positions in that play, if you will. So what are the different things that each person needs to be doing? We'll set deadlines to them as to when they need to get done. There's also a location to put how many hours we need to complete those different plays so that you can evaluate the individual's workload. And then lastly, you just recap with those people that are involved, what the play is, does this fit, does this actually make sense? Just want to show you that one challenge of where's everybody need to be, what are we doing, gets solved by this tool. What are we going to go after? How do we communicate? What's best and worst case scenario? What's the ideal outcome? And then what are the different pieces that we break that down further? Any questions on this, Leia, so far? As I know I just covered a ton of information on something and can't go too deep into it right now, but anything come up?
We don't have any questions right now, but just an exclamation that this is really great information. And I love these tools. They really help to bring it all together and give you a nice format to actually take action.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. All right, so lastly, we need to run the play and keep score. So as I said at the beginning, ideas are cheap and execution is everything. So we've got to execute on these things to actually have these plans in place. And now we actually have to go run that play, follow the plan, and keep score along the way. So if you look at this, at Petra, we use a tool called aligntoday.com. It is built to support implementing the Rockefeller habits and tracking the progress you make towards these priorities or these plays that you've set out for. There's the ability to create child priorities or individual priorities that are on the back and tasks that are on the back sheet of that tool that I just went over. It also has the information around a daily huddle built right into a line, which is the second way that we keep score along the way and make sure that we're implementing things. So here's a 9-step process to a daily huddle. Especially now, right now, we need to make sure that everybody has video conferencing capabilities available. Using a tool to actually track these things and record them, especially if people can't be present in that daily meeting. We need to have somewhere they can go and review the information that was shared. We need to call on people by name to move things through even quicker. This is different in the middle box there on number 5 that we would do now versus typical, is just lead with general overall information about COVID-19. Like if there's things that are changed, if there's a new policy, if it's an update on what are, when we're going to get back to the office, lead there and then go into the following 3 rounds around a personal update of like, how am I doing? Maybe people need to vent. What happened yesterday? What's going on today? In round 2, speak about that, what happened yesterday, what they're going to do today that's relevant to the team. And then in round 3, number 8, you're going to have them commit to what am I going to get done today? What's the most important thing today? And this is how you keep score. What's the most important thing we need to get done today as it pertains to those top 2 or 3 plays, those top 2 or 3 most important things we need to get done as a team over this next 30 to 90 days. Lastly, if you're somebody on this call that has a much larger team, you can actually break these down into cascading huddles that build upon themselves. So maybe you have 5 huddles that lead to 1 leadership team huddling, and we see that in larger organizations on a regular basis. We'll include these in the resources that we'll provide. So we'll give you an actual agenda broken down for the daily huddle and a worksheet to break out what those meeting rhythms look like. And I'll tell you, in organizations, meeting, and I believe this, meeting is a bad word. What most people do with meeting is they sit or stand in a room and talk and leave feeling like, oh, that was fun, and don't improve, don't make decisions, and no action was taken. I want to be clear, this is not that type of meeting. Huddles are entirely designed around action. It's what have I done, what do I need to go do, so that we're getting the work done and the other people on the team are hearing where I'm at so they can help and support as needed. So we are not a proponent and, hey, we should have a whole bunch of meetings. We're a proponent in getting the work done, and daily and weekly huddles do that. They are not typical meetings where you sit and talk and go around in circles. It's focused on the actions we need to take and removing those constraints that are preventing us from taking action. Okay, so we are doing, as I talked, we said there's a lot of information here. We are providing you with what to go do, and we're also going to offer you the opportunity of how to go do it. So I've worked with Leia. We've been hosting these workshops at a significantly discounted rate. Normally it's around $1,000 a seat. Right now we've discounted them in the market for $297 for a seat. I want to be clear though, I'm not here to sell you anything. We're here to provide resources and help. So I've worked with Leia to agree to the first 10 people who are interested in spending 4 hours with us next Wednesday. I will take you through and literally walk you through building out these tools for your company. I'm going to go ahead and put a Zoom link in the chat. It will also be included in the notes. Oh, and Leia, you already did that. Thank you so much. So you're just 1 step ahead of me. I will tell you, this is not something we're distributing publicly. This would only be for clients and friends of InTech Solutions. And what we'll do is we'll be going through those worksheets and those tools, and you'll leave with them filled out all the way up to including what that priority is for you to go do over the next 30 to 90 days. In terms of how you get these resources, so we're also doing, that's right, I forgot, we're doing these a CARES Act and SBA workshop around getting the PPP loan forgiven, or the other EIDL and Main Street financing things that are up there. So you can go up to scaleupwithpetra.eventbrite.com. The next one we have is in 2 weeks on May 20th from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern. And then lastly, I mentioned we will be providing a free copy of VITAMINB. So Andy Bailey, our founder and CEO, wrote VITAMINB, which is relevant right now, of 365 daily doses of information. And if you go to petracoach.com/thevault, petracoach.com/thevault, we will provide a copy of all of these resources and a PDF copy of Andy's book. The vault looks like this here. So when you go to petracoach.com/thevault, you'll put in your information at the bottom so that we can send you that, and you'll actually have access to all of these tools that we've provided and a few more to download free of charge, no strings attached. So you can do this on your own, or as I said, we will be having that workshop next Wednesday. Let me go back to that slide real quick just so you can see that there. Next Wednesday from 9 to 1 p.m. Eastern time, where we will take you through. The first 10 are free, right? So the first 10, you can bring as many people from your team as you want, but up to the first 10 companies, we will provide that to you at no charge, and we'll take you through filling out these resources. So as I tend to do, Leia, as you know, I got a little long-winded because I want to provide a little more detail. So we're getting right up to the bottom of the hour here. I did also provide my information here. That is my cell phone number and my email address. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or anything I can help with. And I'm going to get a drink of water and ask you if there are any other questions or anything that I can do to help answer for our audience today.
Right now, there aren't any questions in the Q&A section. But if anyone, I know that Ryan presented a lot of information in a very, very, very short period of time. If you think to yourself, this is fantastic, I want to get access to those tools, please go to petracoach.com/the-vault. I put that URL in the chat to go grab that and get those tools. And if you think to yourself, this is amazing, and I don't know how I'm going to be able to, A, find the time to do this, or B, figure this all out on my own, please do come to the Pivot Workshop next Wednesday. The offer is just amazingly generous. I consider myself so unbelievably lucky and blessed to have a network of people who are amazing, who really care. Ryan is one of those, and I want to be able to pay all of that forward to the rest of you. So please take advantage of that.
Well, thank you so much. That's generous of you, Leia. Well, at any webinar, the number one thing we got to do is make sure we end on time. So I think we'll give people another minute of their day back. Just as a reminder, go ahead and copy the link that Leia put in the chat. As part of the security measures of Zoom through all of this, they will not let us put clickable links in the chat or in a webinar. So you have to just go ahead and take your mouse, highlight and copy that. You can right click on it and choose copy, and then open up a web browser and hit paste, and then you just put in your information and click sign up. Once again, there's no strings attached, there's no charge to it. As Leia said, we're looking to pay this forward and just be generous in helping those businesses out there that need it to be set up to pivot from defense to offense in this time of uncertainty. Leia, thank you again for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I genuinely appreciate you and exposing me to your audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you all for coming today. The only thing I can say is if you came, let's use these tools and kick some butt, guys.
Sounds good. See you guys.
All right. Bye.